So I must begin by congratulating all of you who are here, not just because you've managed a TEDx license and you're doing a TEDxYouth event, but because you are one of the luckiest people to be of this age at this time. I'm going to talk to you largely about artificial intelligence and education, but more focused on coming of age in the age of artificial intelligence. And this is very important because you won't realize how blessed you are if you don't compare yourself with people at earlier times. I will mostly be taking you into the future, but let's go back 100 years ago. So most of you are born around the 21st century beginning, give or take a few years, and you will spend a long time in the 21st century because longevity is increasing worldwide. Imagine 100 years ago. 100 years ago, 1 week earlier, on the 11th November 1918, the First World War came to an end after 4 years of global fighting. Millions of people suffer, millions of people. From July 2014 to November 2018, the whole world was just fighting and engaged in a world war. If you compare 2014 to 2018, the whole world has been in innovation, spree of innovation, new stuff coming up, excitement all around, which is what you are actually going to be part of. People who were born in early 1900s saw the First World War as teenagers. When they grew to be 30, 40, they saw the Second World War with their children as teenagers. And as Manish just now said, it ended with the Hiroshima-Nagasaki bombing on 6th and 9th August 1945. The world changed after that. The world took a strong lesson, and we've not had any major wars since then, except for the American-China trade war. But let's get on to this. So what is artificial intelligence, and why is it upon us? It's not something which has happened 10 years ago. The first attempt to coin the phrase artificial intelligence was made in 1956 in a Dartmouth conference, and the leaders were the leaders who founded this. In 60s, when I started computing, my first exposure to computing was 1966. There were three major types of computing happening. One was people like us who were scientists and engineers who used Fortran as a programming language to solve scientific problems. Fortran itself is a contraction for formula translator. People who were in businesses were using COBOL, common business-oriented language, for processing large amounts of data for commercial purposes, inventory, payroll, all that kind of stuff. There's a third breed about whom we don't know. They used languages called Lisp and Prolog and were busy seeing whether computers can do logical things also in addition to pure computational things. It was slow in progress. They were somewhat disappointed. In 1970s, there was what is called the winter of AI. There was actually a report by Lighthill, a Lighthill report, which said, let us not fund this anymore. Nothing is going to come out of this field. The larger goal was to emulate the human brain, and as you can imagine, it is extremely challenging, and even now we have not fully understood. But we've made some interesting progress, and this is what we want to talk about. So why did it lie low for so long, and what was the reason for the sudden progress? The first reason is very interesting. It was that while these scientists and engineers were working with computers with certain kind of processing power, kids were playing computer games and video games. And one day it dawned upon these scientists and engineers that these kids' games are having faster processing chips for all the animation and video that they're doing. And so they started using graphic chips for doing computational problem in artificial intelligence. That was one thing. The other big thing that happened was the idea that traditional computing, what happened, you had a problem, you wrote a program, and you got the answer. They realized that this is not the best method. Why don't we do a step-by-step thing? So they created something which are today called artificial neural networks, where you said the first layer receives the first information, the last layer will tell you what the output is, but in between there are a large number of hidden layers where you do processing. And this fundamental change in approach to solving problems, which went away from first to last, was a big thing. The third thing that happened was that a lot of data became available. Earlier on, people made lots of such neural networks. They made a model of an analytical system, a medical diagnosis, all that. But what is the data they had? Very few points, and therefore it was not usable. A very important problem in AI is facial recognition. So you could write all things that you want for facial recognition, but how many photographs did we have 20 years ago? You would have a photograph of your marriage, a graduation ceremony, or something else. You can't train a machine with that. Now that we had the internet, and we had large amounts of photos on the internet with Flickr and this and that, you could train a program to recognize photographs, and now you know facial recognition exists on most mobile devices, including mine. So my device locks up because it sees my face and recognizes me. This is the big thing that happened. So you started looking at the actual thing which made the change was just being able to recognize a cat. But in trying to recognize a cat, the amount of problem solving that happened was enormous. So this is the thing. So now we are looking at AI impacting education. So there's a very nice book called The Fourth Education Revolution by Alan Sanders, and he's the Vice Chancellor of Buckingham University. He was also at schools. And he said that education has been the Cinderella of AI. People have been talking of driverless cars and this and that, but education is going to be one of the most impacted things. And why is education going to be so important? Because as we heard, education is the most important thing for change. And what educators do is they transform an ignorant person into a knowledgeable person. They actually take them through 4 stages, a stage of unknown incompetence. So you didn't even know that deep learning is something that you should learn. Then you get curious, you do something. So you have known incompetence. I want to learn deep learning, where do I go? And then I tell you something about deep learning, so you have some idea. And then after a little more practice, project work, etc., you know deep learning as you were born knowing deep learning. And I think that is a very, very important aspect of the educator. So what is the expectation from AI in education? There are 2 expectations. One expectation is that the youth will be aware of the issues in AI. What are the tools? What are the processes? What can you do with it? And you don't have to wait for going to university to do that. You can start right when you are in school and be a lifelong learner. Future is not about 2-3 years of education lasting your life. It is going to be actually learning throughout your life, and you're all going to have a very long life. It is said after 2045, death will actually be optional. You must have seen many people who are 80 and 85 and 90 today around you, so we are not talking fiction. So you have to be a lifelong learner because you have a long life, and some of these things. What is the other expectation from AI? The other expectation from AI is that a very good, high-quality, personalized education can be available to everyone. And I think this is a very, very important thing. Anthony Seldon in his book says that everybody will be able to get an education. See, he's British. He talks of education like Eton or Wellington, which is in New Zealand. For us, it would have been everybody will have an IIT-like education. And I can say about IITs with something because I have a PhD from one IIT. I've taught in IIT Kanpur for about 10 years. I was member board of management from IIT Delhi for 6 years. This is what we see. And IIT education is not about engineering. There are very few people who actually do real engineering after IIT. It is about problem solving. So Raghuram Rajan does electrical engineering from IIT Delhi, but becomes an economist. And there are any number of instances of such people. And this is what the future is. So when the IITs were created in 1960s, they were ready for what was called the third industrial age, the age of electronics, computers, and everything. And that is why you saw IITs and people, similar institutes, Manipal, VIT, whatever, succeed and flourish in it. Today we are living in what is called the fourth industrial age. And the fourth industrial age is a convergence or fusion of the physical world, the IT world, and the biological world. And this is very important, that compartmentalization and silos, that I am in non-medical stream, I am in engineering stream, is no longer important. You have to know a lot of things about everything. You need to understand what is called the fundas or the core concepts. You don't have to know the details because the details will be done by the machine. And instead of just putting together this, we now have a term which I am encouraging called braided learning. So, braided learning means I know literature also, I know Sanskrit also, I know history also, but I also know physics, chemistry, maths, engineering and medical. Let me give an example. When you say something like this, it looks awkward. How can all this be there? Let me give an example of medical imaging. The first tool of medical imaging was X-rays. And what happened with X-rays? You had to stand somewhere and it could only see your bones, etc. Then ultrasound was created because it could see other things, tissues and muscle. Then somebody created CT scan. He said, why should the X-ray machine be static? Let me move the tube and let me move the patient and I can get a full body CT scan, computer tomography scan. But most recently, the most important thing that has come is called MRI, magnetic resonance imaging. Now you look at how it works. It has a huge magnetic field which stirs up the protons in the water that we have in the body. These protons start having some cycle which is measured, which depends, now can tell you about what's going on in your nerves. So you have MRI for the brain, you can check out this is happening in the cortex, neocortex, hippocampus, this is where the injury is. So all neuroscientists use MRI as a basic tool. So you had physics there, you had biology there, and how are the images interpreted? They are used a technology called convolutional neural network, which is basically a part of machine learning. I mentioned to you these layers, etc. So how these layers interact. So tomorrow's leadership has to understand all this. And then you may have to understand the legal issues, the regulatory issues, the import issues, the intellectual property issues. So this narrow thing of doing physics, chemistry, maths and being over, or learning zoology and botany and being over is gone. But you have this powerful tool called AI to help you. And this is what the future is about. So AI becomes an integral part of education to help you learn more and better and solve problems. I think this is the big change that we are looking at. It won't happen overnight. So you will have level 1 AI, level 2 AI, level 3 AI, level 4 AI, level 5 AI. In level 5, you will actually have brain-computer interface. Today, you can have a band around your brain which measures your EEG and so on and says exactly what your thoughts are, what you are thinking and so on. It's a completely new world awaiting there. But the beauty is every single person will be able to get the education that person deserves. Except for serious biological problems, everybody will be able to learn whatever he or she desires to learn and can continue learning to supplement with whatever is needed at a given point of time. You heard the story of Kalna and the curse which his guru gave him, that he will forget whatever he needed at a certain point of time. You got the opposite of it. You got the blessings now that whatever you need to know, whenever you want to need to know, you will have available. They are saying in 10 years' time, there will be a chip in your brain which will be able to get you everything that you download. Today you download in your mobile and then processes, but then it will be in your brain itself. Amazing kind of a synchronicity. So it may look awkward to you, but your spectacles do the same, right? The pacemaker in your heart does the same. So why can't we have chips which are there? And already there are people who have been going around with chips under their skin. I use the chip to measure my blood sugar throughout 3 weeks continuously and so on and so forth. So towards conclusion, I think one thing I want to say, you are in the most exciting period of humanity. To me, the greatest inspiration is Vivekananda. And Vivekananda said almost 100 years ago, arise, awake, and stop not till the goal is reached. And our goal is to empower everybody to rise to his full potential using whatever tools are available for learning and will be available for learning, and they are AI-enabled learning. And this is something which may look to you very distant, but is not so distant. You will see that happening depending upon where you are in a couple of years, not more than 5 years. There's already something called Ecole 42, which is in France and is also now in Silicon Valley, which is training large number of people to become software engineers. No entry qualification, no IIT test. You just go there and you will figure out whether you belong there or not. So it is a question of coming in, working and seeing whether this is fit for you or not. And if it's not fit for you, you go. There's no teacher, no AICT approved Madan Mohan Malviya project trained teacher to teach you. You learn through peer learning, group learning and AI. This is the kind of future we are looking at, an extremely bright future. Some people will scare you that jobs will go away, but jobs have always been going away, but new and better jobs have been coming. Some people will, of course, be left behind because they won't be able to move fast, but being able to move fast, learn new things rapidly on your own will be the success mantra. All the best.